tiakina maramataga e te atua, mo tō mātou kingi, mo te wharekau I ariki, mo ngā tinana e mauiwiti ana, tā ainoa kia mātou katoa I te rānei hai. No te koro ria, no te koro ria, no te koro ria, rire hau, whai mārire. Kia ora mai rā tātou, ko te mihi tuatahi ki ngā atua, nā rātou ngā mea katoa. Te mihi tuarua nei, ki te whare e tū mai nei e karapoti ana I a tātou I tēnei wāmea ki, nō reira, tūtonu mai rā. Te mihi tuatoru, kia koutou, ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohe, kia koutou ngā tipātua, kai a koutou te mana, nō reira e mihi ana kia koutou. I nai nei ka whakaro atu tātou ki ngō tātou tini mate, tātou kua wehe ki te pō, kua haere ki tua o te ārai, nō reira e mihi ana kia koutou. Moi mai rā, whakangaro atu ai. Kia hoki ki te hunga ora, tātou e ora nei, tātou kua hui mai nei, nō reira e mihi ana kia koutou. I nai nei, ko tā mātou o whāmea ki kia koutou, he waiata iti, hei whakanui I tēnei kaupapa whakahirahira, tēnei kaupapa e kohi ana ngai tātou o ngā hauewha o tēnei au. Nō reira, ki te mōhio koutou ki tēnei waiata, tēnā waiata tahi. Kia ora. E aroha te whakapono me te rangi mari e tātou e. Nō reira, e aku nui, e aku rahi, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai rā tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Welcome everyone to the 2022 Going Global Music Summit. The most exciting thing about today is that we can actually all be here in one room after such a long time with people from all around the globe making plans to take New Zealand music internationally, travelling and supporting New Zealand artists out there on a world stage. It's been a very long time, so thank you all for coming today. Thank you. I wasn't sure if I should draw attention to the fact that I'm really short. IMNZ's core values are to educate, advocate and celebrate, and with these values we aim for our continued operations to help drive the success of our members, ultimately serving our primary purpose, which is fostering the growth and development of New Zealand's independent music industry. And it's with the aim of educate that we're here today. IMNZ, in partnership with the New Zealand Music Commission, are immensely proud to produce a knowledge-based music conference that helps promote New Zealand artists with skills, knowledge and opportunity to take their music to an international stage. This year's Going Global Music Summit has gathered an amazing array of international music experts to Roundhead Studios. Their advice, anecdotes and discussions will teach key skills to New Zealand artists and musicians and music professionals through panels, masterclasses and presentations on how to succeed in the international music market. We have 48 speakers from both international and local music industries, delivering the latest ideas on how to get ahead in international markets. As well as panels, discussions and speeches, we have 12 artists showcasing their music on Saturday evening. These spots were hard won, and the final artists chosen from a pool of high quality applicants. 12 artists that we believe are market ready for an international stage, market ready to drive and promote themselves throughout the world. Please come to the Wine Cellar and Whammy Bar on Saturday evening to support them, book them, sign them, share them on social media, applaud their excellence and help get them on their journeys. In closing, I would like to acknowledge our partners and sponsors of this event, as it takes a whole team of people to bring this thing together. Going Global Music Summit 2022 is proudly brought to you by Independent Music New Zealand, the New Zealand Music Commission, APRA AMCOS, Auckland City of Music, Disco, Merlin, Mortlock McCormack Law, NZ On Air, Spotify and Recorded Music New Zealand. Thank you all for coming along today. Please learn something, meet people, talk business and take New Zealand music out there into the world.
I'm almost short, but not quite as. Morena. Pip Ryan-Kidd, Chairperson of Independent Music New Zealand. Thank you very much for letting this event happen. Kia ora. Ko Kath, tēnei mai I te reo reko a Aotearoa, ko Taini Uta Waka, ko Ngāti Ora Kaua ki te tonga te iwi, ko Ngāti Kapu te hapu. I've got the housekeeping job, so it's kind of the boring one, but it's pretty exciting to see you all today. Nothing boring about that. But before we get started on those things, we have a video message that we'd like to play from a good friend of New Zealand music.
I'm not able to join you in person. This is an event I've really enjoyed attending in the past, and I know the next few days.
Do we reckon we can go back to the beginning on that one? Basically, she said, you guys are really awesome. You're very good looking. Can't believe she's not here to be with you all. And if we can't get this going now, we will play it at the end of the market today, won't we? But yeah, she said your choice. New Zealand music's really rad. Really hopes that people start exporting and taking their music to the world at pace now. You are going to try it again? So I can stop my ad-libbing. Sing again. Hide it in my everything is caught fire. Makes a bit of a scene when she arrives. Always does. Always does. I will do some housekeeping and then we'll see how we go. Welcome back to Roundhead. It's really great to be back in this world-class studio when we're talking about world-class New Zealand artists and what the market is doing out there. So we're looking forward to a couple of days of excellent panel discussions. Hopefully there's some good debates. We're going to get different views and different opinions from different parts of the world and actually just hear from some really amazing human beings. So very pleased that we can bring this to you today. Now, if you need a bathroom, you go straight out into the kitchen area and there's one there. You go downstairs and there's one at the bottom of the stairs. That's only two. There's quite a few of you. So if you go around the building into the car park, which is on Newton Road, there is a big luxury toilet block which was dropped off there at 8:30 this morning. So you'll be able to use that. Your ablutions will be fine. If anyone has need for first aid, the production office is by the front door, so the Newton Road door. The production office is there and they have a first aid kit if you need it. If we have an emergency and we need to exit the building, if you're upstairs, go straight out past the production office onto Newton Road. If you're downstairs in the brick room, you go out the way you came in through the roller door, and our emergency gathering space is outside the Orange, the building next door, on Newton Road. So that's where we will all meet. Please put your rubbish in the bins. So we can spend our time looking after guests instead of picking up trash. There are water coolers around, so try and minimise the plastic and refill your water bottles. And there's hand sanitiser all around the venue. Please use it. Wear a mask if you want to. It's a thing that we can all gather, so we want to keep people as safe as possible. Am I talking over the Prime Minister? I will lose my job. Jokes. But also importantly, this is a safe space and we want everyone to feel comfortable. If for any reason you are feeling that you're a bit intimidated, you're not feeling comfortable, please go to the production office or downstairs to registration and someone will help you out. It's important that we all feel good together in this space. We're getting... So the first panel we're going to do is the market today. If you've been to Going Global before, we always start with like a New Zealand market overview. Having a look at what's happening here, what's the current figures, what is our current environment that we're operating in before we start taking things to the world. If you don't have a seat, you've got half an hour here, so there is some spare seating downstairs in the brick room, and there is a video feed coming downstairs, so you can watch it down there if you're watching online. Good morning, we're very organised here, I'm sure. And we'll have one more go at this, and if it doesn't work, we will come back to it later. Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this year's Going Global Music Summit. I'm very sorry I'm not able to join you in person. This is an event I've really enjoyed attending in the past, and I know the next few days are going to be incredibly interesting as you come together to celebrate homegrown music, talent, and share valuable insights from the industry. It goes without saying that the past few years have been incredibly difficult, particularly for the live music scene. However, despite the challenges, our artists have adapted and found new ways to showcase their talent and share their music with the world. It hasn't been easy though. I would like to acknowledge the New Zealand Music Commission for the work they've been doing to facilitate some of this work, functioning as the connection between government support and the industry throughout these really unprecedented times. As we look ahead to the coming months, there is a lot to be excited about. Here in government, we've extended our Aotearoa touring program for another year so that we can continue to support our local talent. New Zealand acts are also once again able to tour internationally, bringing Kiwi music back to live crowds overseas. I'm told Fat Freddy's Drop, for example, have already been to Europe with great success, and the Beths have just wrapped up a US tour. Our music scene has a huge amount to contribute, both to New Zealand but also to the world. Everyone here today is part of that success. You're creating, producing and supporting music that is making a difference. I hope the next few days are productive and inspiring, and I wish you all the very best for the months ahead. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Provost.
And with that, we will move on to the first panel of Going Global 2022. So the market today, as I said before, it's an overview of where we are at the moment, what's the New Zealand market looking like, what's the environment we're operating in. We're going to have three presentations, first from Joe Oliver at Recorded Music, then from Anthony Healy from APRA AMCOS, and then I'm going to talk a bit about the work that we're doing helping taking New Zealand music to the world, the Music Commission. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Joe. There's a ticket.
Kia ora koutou. Just adjust the height here. I'm a little bit annoyed with Kath for making me follow the Prime Minister. She's a better speaker than me, so hopefully I can keep you entertained with a few sort of facts and figures about the music market. Ko Joe Oliver, tōku ingoa. I'm the CEO of Recorded Music New Zealand. You'll meet some other recorded music staff here today. Dean Cameron, Head of Member Services, and Liz Diamond, Head of Licensing and Operations. And if you want to know more about recorded music, you can head over to our workshop this afternoon. So, Do I have a slide? Oh, I've got the clicker too. Okay. The power's in my hands. Forward click. So first, a little bit of context about Recorded Music New Zealand. What is it that we do? So we represent recording artists and right holders through licensing, advocacy and promotion. So that's the recorded music part of the copyright that we're looking after. So this is what we do. Really our main priority is to maximise income to recording artists. So we do so that's our main priority. Advocacy is another big part of what we do. All of the income from recorded music depends on copyright, depends on a strong copyright framework. So we're fighting all the time to keep that in place. There are others who would like copyright to be weakened and would like to pay less for music. So that's a battle on a daily basis. Some of the other things we do include promotional activities like the Aotearoa Music Awards and the official New Zealand music charts. This is a snapshot of our current membership, so several thousand right holders and recording artists registered with Recorded Music New Zealand and growing rapidly. So diving into the market as advertised, so this gives you a snapshot of recorded music revenues and how they break down. So this shows you all income to recorded music rights holders that are based in New Zealand. So it includes income from international repertoire and New Zealand repertoire. It doesn't cover income received overseas, and it doesn't cover songwriting and publishing because that's going to be covered shortly, and it doesn't cover live performance income. So really it's focused around the recorded music rights. And as you can see, the slices there. Oh, okay, that's not the slide I thought it was. We go back. Okay, that's the slide I thought it was. So these are the different slices of recorded music revenues overall. You can see at the top there sync licensing, where recorded music is synced into television and ads and so on. Downloads, which is a very small and still shrinking part of the market. Physical, CDs and vinyl. So in 2021, physical revenues actually grew for the first time since 2001, and that was due to growth in vinyl. So that was an interesting development. Public performance in the yellow is the piece that Recorded Music New Zealand deals with. Talk about that shortly. And streaming, of course, is the largest in terms of an overall mix. In terms of the overall mix of revenues, streaming is the largest. That includes Spotify and Apple, but also YouTube, TikTok and Facebook revenues as well. And just to say, I think I keep moving these slides without meaning to. Okay, just to say, you haven't got a comparison there overall, but streaming revenues are still growing really well. A bit of a slowdown in the total market through the COVID years, 2020, 2021, like you'd expect, but streaming still strong. Obviously, public performance, which I'm just about to come on to, there you can see the couple of years of COVID impacts, and this is diving down into that slice that recorded music deals with. So you can see there the impact on radio and television revenues through COVID. So there was an impact on advertising revenue, which had a flow-on impact to recorded music rights holders. And then, of course, the public performance piece, which is licensed via One Music. A lot of that comes through hospitality and retail, which also suffered through COVID. So you can see that 2020 was a tough year, but things looking not too bad in 2021, coming back up almost to where we were. Still some challenges ahead, as I say. It's still not easy to encourage licensees to reflect the true value of music, and that's an ongoing battle for us. And how is New Zealand music going? So this shows you the New Zealand music portion of streams on streaming services. So while streaming overall has been on the increase, the New Zealand music portion has remained kind of relatively stable around 8%. We've seen record amounts of New Zealand music on radio. So the 2021 result showed almost 24% on commercial radio stations of New Zealand music, which is really great news and exceeds the previous best figure of just over 20%. And of course, a lot of that growth in 2021 was in Aotearoa, also unprecedented growth, thanks to initiatives like Waiata Anthems. And so that's also a piece of good news that we need to keep building on. Just wanted to say a couple of words about the official New Zealand music charts as another kind of indicator of the market and one of the things recorded music does. So the official New Zealand music charts are compiled by Recorded Music New Zealand and published weekly, as you probably know. They take into account data from all retailers across New Zealand, including the streaming services, DSPs, and there's also radio airplay charts compiled as well. Variety of different charts. What you see there is the official New Zealand Top 40, so that's the most popular tracks by consumption, whether they're New Zealand tracks or whether they're overseas tracks. Of course, previously the charts were a lot more focused around sales of CDs or downloads, and now that consumption is mainly around streaming, you'll see the charts look a bit different to what they used to, and often are not moving as much as they used to. So if people are continuously streaming the same sorts of tracks, those tracks are going to continue to appear in the charts on an ongoing basis. And that's something that charts, I guess, need to work on in terms of reflecting the market. They reflect the consumption that's actually happening, but they're maybe not so interesting. So that's something to look at. Wanted to show you briefly, again, in terms of, market indicators. Another one of the charts that we operate is the Hot 20, New Zealand Hot 20. So that's New Zealand tracks only. And it's designed to reflect tracks that are moving, tracks that are new, tracks that are coming up and doing well. And I think you'll find it's a really great way to see new tracks that are coming out. We listen to it all the time to see what's happening. Other thing I just wanted to say is that all commercially released recordings are eligible for the chart, so there's no application that you need to do. The data comes through to us, and so all those tracks can be included. We've recently started including video streams in the charts. So, as said, the official charts are intended to reflect how people are consuming music, how they're listening to it. And video is a big part of that now. So we've recently started to take that data into account. Just good to know. YouTube is one of those platforms that people are listening to music on. And so good to know that it's now included in the charts. There's quite a bit of detail behind that I'm not going to go into, but if anyone's interested, you can head over to our website and check out what's included and what isn't. So in terms of the other activities Recorded Music does, I just wanted to take 2 minutes really to talk about the Aotearoa Music Awards, which is the annual awards ceremony run by Recorded Music New Zealand, intended to celebrate and promote recording artists and their recordings in Aotearoa. It's been going for many years, and I'm sure many of you have attended. This year we've taken a pause on the ceremony itself. We're taking a bit of a look at what's the purpose of the awards, who does it serve, is it still serving the people that it needs to serve, are we doing the right things? And as part of that process, we are asking everybody to have their say. That catchy URL down there, /news, you'll be able to find the survey there that's open to any recording artists and rights holders to fill in, and actually anybody in the music community. So head over there, take a look, feel free to fill it in. We'd love to have your feedback. I'm not sure we can necessarily implement all of it, but it's really great to just stop and take a look and see if we're doing the right things. So encourage everyone to have a look at that. And that's me. Thank you.
I'll try not to move around. Kia ora koutou. Ko Aotearoa tōku ingoa. I'm the head of the New Zealand division of APRA AMCOS. It's great to be here. Thanks IMNZ for the welcome and the invitation. Thank you to the Music Commission as well. Cass told me I've got 5 minutes, so I'm really going to rush through this. Some of the numbers that I'll talk about are Australasian-wide. We're very much an Australasian organisation, and much of the revenue for you, our members, I know there's a lot of members here, is caught up in that Australasian revenue numbers. So it's kind of important that we take an Australasian view of it, and I think it's something that we can all take away as Australia, this big market to our east or west, to our west. Is there and really should be really important to us all when we're talking about going away and acting globally. Who are we? Well, we're music writers, composers and publishers. We exist basically to ensure that our members get paid fairly when their works are used. And we have partners such as RMNZ, who we operate our general licensing, our public performance licensing operation, One Music. We have partners who we partner with to provide services to make sure that we can do things as efficiently as possible. So there's 113,000 members in total across New Zealand and Australia. One figure that we're really embarrassed about and not happy about is the fact that, around 75% of our members are male. And it's a gender inequity that we're doing a lot of work on trying to find the reasons for. It's a slow burn. Thankfully, our new members that are joining, we're up to a sort of a 70-30 split, which is an improvement because we have been focusing on ensuring that non-male members are comfortable in joining the organisation. Very much so. You'll see there that in New Zealand there's around 14,000, around 12% of the total number. Now, when I get on to talk about revenue and numbers, the numbers are really big, and I want to try and make them as relevant as I can to the audience here and to the room. Overall, APRA AMCOS, will celebrate another milestone revenue year, quite significant increases on previous years, and we kind of wonder why those numbers are there. And as I'll show you, that there are reasons why those numbers are so big. Some are relevant to us, some not perhaps so relevant to us. We report on 4 different companies: APRA AMCOS, APRA NZ, and AMCOS NZ, and that is our total revenue. Really importantly, we have total revenue, we have costs to pay, so we deduct those costs from our revenue to give us our net distributable revenue, which is the money that gets paid to our members. Our costs last year, a little bit higher than the year before, still sitting at around 13. We like to have them sort of around 12, but 13%. 13.34% last year, giving us a 20.7% increase in net distributable revenue. So what share of that, though, is going to us here? And I'm not sure I meant to point this. There we go. So when we look at the New Zealand specific revenue, again, significant increases. And again, sort of representing sort of around 14% of our total revenue. So even in these sort of COVID times, revenue has been really strong, and that might come as a surprise to some, although As you can see here, as I break down the revenue a little bit further, taking a deeper dive into it, digital is really strong. So digital still it's grown throughout COVID. The digital revenue, streaming services, VOD services have all grown. One of the major aspects of growth within APRA AMCOS has been our multi-territory licensing operation, where we're licensing on behalf of particular music publishers and PROs from around the world, but licensing digital services in Asia. So that second line up there you'll see is all new growth, and it's all as a result of our multi-territory licensing operation throughout Asia. Why would we do that? A member might ask. We do that because from that revenue that we earn up there, we draw commission from it that goes against the running of the operation itself, which drives down that overall expense to revenue ratio, helping our local members. Again, you'll see there similar story to what Joe kind of outlined. Radio TV revenue still remarkably strong. For these COVID times. Public performance revenues dropped a little bit as a result of live music being impacted. So there's been some difficulty around some of those aspects of our revenue operation. I just want to talk too about the services that we provide to you guys as you go global. Obviously, there is an international network of PROs around the world. So you as APRA members, as soon as your music is used overseas, there is a network of PROs around the world that we're doing exactly the same job as we do here in New Zealand for our international affiliates' works. They're collecting on your behalf, paying us, and then we pay you. So similarly, when their works are used here, we collect and we pay the international affiliates, and you end up with an incredibly complex network of relationships that look a little bit like that, but I've gone past it. Okay, I'm going to go straight to this. That's how there we go. Okay. We'll skip over the complex bit. And where is that money coming from? Again, obviously the international money that our members earn is very much dominated by digital income. It's just where the market's at. But increasingly, for our members here, television overseas is really important. Many of our high-earning writers write music for TV. And radio too, still very, very a strong source of revenue internationally. And this just sort of shows where the money comes from. Again, primarily from the US, the two American societies, ASCAP, BMI, PRS, those strong trading partners is where most of our music is being used. Then the next European societies, again, strong revenue from those societies, especially in the areas of TV. So that is just a real snapshot. I think the takeaway is that there's still, a significant revenue increase from years before. Obviously, when we talk about international, our international revenue is still growing. So there's great markets. There's great markets for really good, authentic New Zealand music that's out there. And I would hope that you, as you're embarking on sort of global operations, thinking more globally, would take advantage of the services that we provide to you, our members. We have staff in LA, staff in Nashville, staff in London that operate small offices that can act as real sort of beachheads for you guys as you're travelling around those places. So please take those opportunities because they're there for you. And here, more locally, you, our members, what we've been concentrating on. You guys will have seen your new portal, the writer portal that's been released in the last couple of years. You'll see that hopefully you're all using the sort of the business insights that portal delivers you about where your money's come from, where your royalties come from. We've got some great initiatives coming up, some great Song Hub initiatives that the Commission and New Zealand On Air and various partners partner with on us, and it's great to be able to do those in person once again. We've got a visit today from our lead person, our director of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Music Office, NATSIMO, in Australia. Leah's here with she's performing with Midnight Oil tomorrow, so she's here in the office, and the NATSIMO office and operation in Australia has been transformational for us as an organisation, much the same as the work that Dame Hinewehi Mohi is doing for us in our Oro project here. So there are Waiter Anthems again. It's launching tonight, another series of Waiter Reo Māori that is being released over the next couple of weeks. So there's lots of really interesting stuff happening locally. And that's it from me. Thanks, Kath. It was probably a little bit longer than 5.
Right. Now, I'm going to be real quick, super quick, the quickest presentation ever. We'll run a little bit into the break because we really want to take as many pearls of wisdom as possible from the illustrious Shapo. But, okay, fast. The New Zealand Music Commission has the New Zealand Export Office. So, Outward Sound, our international music market program and office, look after New Zealand artists when they are taking their music globally. Come on. I wonder, is it out of battery? Is that what's... Why? Well, there should be about 3 other columns there. All right, so before the pandemic, 104 artists performed overseas in the year prior to the pandemic. It's a 10% increase on previous years. Between them, they played 1,440 shows, and those shows were across 45 countries. That's not 45 countries, but we're getting there. The reason I was going to put up the 45 countries is because pre-pandemic we were getting really diverse and really broad in the countries that New Zealand music was travelling to. And I'll refer to that a little bit later, but not that much later. It's starting to change. So what we have now is that streaming, it continues to grow as a revenue stream for New Zealand artists, and it's becoming hugely significant. We know that the per stream payment isn't big, but when you're getting a huge volume of them, it really starts to make a difference. So there were 12 artists from Aotearoa that had over 1 million streams last week. So, yeah, not over the last few months, but last week. So, alphabetically, Bank, Benny, Crowded House, Fat Freddy's Drop, LAB Leisure, Little Bubblegum. If you don't know Little Bubblegum, Underground Rap, West Auckland, 1.6 million likes on TikTok. You should go check them out. Lord, Naked and Famous, Princess Chelsea, 660, Unknown Mortal Orchestra. And under the 1 million mark, the next artist was only 6,000 streams under. So there's a lot going on. We had over 29 New Zealand artists that had over 500,000 streams. And between those 29 artists that had over 500,000 streams, the total number of streams was 58,850,000. 7 days. That's really good. Hey, it worked. And even if we look at our data and we look at the 100th most streamed New Zealand artists, looking down our chart, they still had over 50,000 streams over that 7-day period. Now, streaming is providing this really great passive income for New Zealand artists. It's something that just ticks along while you're going and doing other things, and that's one of the beauties of the digital market. But New Zealand music, we still want it to be heard, and we want it to be on stages and played around the world. So even though our border settings haven't allowed people to tour for the last 2 years, there has still been a lot of New Zealand music going out there. One of the things that Alan Holt, our international manager, did was he implemented during the pandemic, instead of supporting people to tour, we'll support people for their promotion and marketing, so they're not going to lose the gains that they had made, and they weren't going to be going back and starting at zero. And it's kind of hard to measure definitively, but we're seeing really positive results. And now, borders are open, and we're seeing a huge growth in international touring. I'm not even pressing the button. This is the crazy thing. All right, I'll do it like this. We'll see what happens. So Outward Sound and our music export program, that alone has supported all the artists that we saw up on the screen before. They are all either recently back from tour or going on tour in the very near future. The demand for New Zealand artists to go overseas, but also the demand on the Outward Sound funding is getting very, very high. Now, there's going to be some challenges around that, like the last Outward Sound round. I think Alan and the team could only really support about 25 or 30% of the opportunities available. So this is something that we're going to have to look at and address over the coming times. Now, if you want to know more about Outward Sound, Alan and his colleague Rebecca are doing a panel here at 1:35 to explain what is Outward Sound, the beginner's guide, so that's in this room here. When we came out of the pandemic, everyone said the world had changed. Everyone said things were going to be completely different. And then I was going back, looking at the stats, running the numbers. Actually, not at all. So the amount of New Zealand shows that shows by New Zealand artists that happened in Australia in 2019 is 17%. What we're looking at this year is 15%. Not much of a change at all. On the next slide, looking at America, I was sure this would be different. You know, the cost of going to America, what's happening in America is making it harder to tour. So I was sure we were going to see a massive reduction. Not at all, 1%. No big change at all. But what we are seeing is some of the emerging markets for New Zealand, which was mainly Eastern Europe, South America, and there was big growth in Asian territories, that has pulled right back. So we are kind of going to our tried and true and what we know. So we have some challenges facing us. The cost of travel is rising rapidly. Foreign exchange is going pretty nuts. This morning, the foreign exchange rate against the US dollar dropped to its lowest point in 13 years. Everything is going to cost more money. We're looking at things being exceptionally more expensive in some places. We're hoping this is not a consistent downward trend, but you just really don't know right now. Visas and work permits, the cost of those are increasing, but mainly because of the timelines are getting so much longer, the amount of time you have to spend paying a lawyer has grown exponentially. Brexit has got some challenges as far as going between UK and Europe easily, so we've got challenges there. Climate change is something we're all going to have to address, and touring and climate change aren't particularly happy mates. These are just the things that we're going to have to look at. But there's positives. All right, so the volume of opportunities and the different kinds of opportunities New Zealand artists are getting is rising. That streaming income, that is helping people have a better base to start take their music to the world. Synchronisation income is growing significantly. I reckon this year we will double synchronisation income in New Zealand for New Zealand artists. So the amount of money that New Zealand artists make when their music is placed in films and games and television and things like that. And as Joe and Ant pointed out, we have a stronger domestic market than we probably ever have before. We need to keep striving to do things better, and it is not great for everyone, but we're starting from a pretty good place. So, taking your music to the world, we're starting at a pretty good place. And that it was the quickest I could possibly do this and jump over things. Kia ora. Because I want to hear from Shay, so I want to hurry through this. Thank you. Now, you'll be really pleased to know that nothing has a clicker until after lunch, so everything will be quite smooth until then, I'm sure. But for our first international guest today, I am very pleased to welcome the renowned producer, whose bio, if you have read, you will see how exceptional he is. And we've also got a brilliant New Zealand journalist here with a huge knowledge about music from around the world. So as soon as they actually get here, we are going to have a keynote interview, which is the producer Shay Pope with Martin Pepperell, who are just coming through the doors now. Welcome them, eh? Yeah.
Who was saying? You first.
Good morning. Good to see a whole bunch of people I know here. Morena.
Good morning.
Everybody.
Good morning.
Can they hear?
Is this on? Oh, there it goes. Okay. All right, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, good morning. Welcome. Thanks for having me here. This is exciting. First time out here,
So we've got a Shay Pope. We'll just do the little formal introduction. Shay Pope is an American record executive, record producer, and songwriter from Boston, Massachusetts. He'll be talking about his life in music and where he sees the key changes in the global market today. The Grammy Award-winning producer has written and produced hits for A$AP Rocky and The Weeknd, been the head of A&R and chief operating officer of Kanye West's Good Music label collective, co-produced with Lauryn Hill on her iconic album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, worked as a head of A&R at Warner Brothers, co-produced Bound 2 with Kanye West, and executive produced Yeezus, produced alongside Dr. Dre at Aftermath Records, and composed film scores with the legendary Hans Zimmer. Shay has worked with Aretha Franklin, Carlos Santana, Whitney Houston, Nas, Christina Aguilera, Destiny's Child, Jay-Z, Eminem, and many more. Man, what a resume. Pretty good, right? Pretty good. And more important than that, super humble, super willing to learn, really nice guy. It's really lovely to talk to him yesterday to prepare for this. So, Boston, Massachusetts. You know, what do you guys know about Boston? Like, how do we perceive it? What do we think about Boston in terms of music? Because Boston's got a pretty interesting musical history, right?
Yeah. Well, Aerosmith. We've got a few
James
things.
Taylor. New Edition.
Yeah, we got a couple of cool things.
Chick Corea, but a lot of people who started in Boston probably had to leave Boston to make it in music, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's just the general pattern. I mean, I think Boston benefits that it's so close in proximity to New York. And, it's a 4-hour drive to New York, so a lot of artists could just go. When I grew up, we just followed everything that was happening in New York. So a week later, it was be in Boston. So
Yeah. So how, do you think, how formative was Boston to you as a music maker and a music thinker?
I mean, for me, it was great because I went to high school literally about 5 minutes from the Berklee School of Music. So music was all around, music stores, record stores and everything. And I lived in vinyl stores and music stores. Those were my pastimes. So that really was influential. And the fact that it's just, Boston is very neighborhoody. So it's still very you've got a Jewish community, you've got an Italian community. So each time you're in these different communities, you're getting the influences from there. So, I went to a school in a predominantly Jewish community, but, I knew about more punk music at 14 than, probably any kid I knew,
Yeah, and so from there you head down to Virginia Beach to do the major in finance. And it's at this amazing pivotal time when Teddy Riley's moved down there. He set up the operation, Diddy's down there doing the parties, Jay-Z's in the area. People like Missy and all of that are happening. Talk about that.
I think that was, part of this, one of the special things of my journey. I went to a college called Hampton University. A lot of people may know the area because it's from where the basketball player Allen Iverson is from. And it's very near to where Pharrell from the Neptunes is from. So I met all these people back then. So it was Iverson was in high school, Pharrell was in high school, Teddy had just set up shop there. So it was this really unique time, and it's a very small area. So we all kind of knew each other and so on and so forth. So we were able to kind of share notes and, talk, meet each other then. And, if you did music and
swap equipment and stuff.
Yeah, I actually sold Pharrell and Chad their first ASR, one of their first keyboards.
Yeah, and because I guess one of the things you talked about last night is really quickly you got inside out on all of the equipment. So
yeah, I did. Like any kid coming up, especially back then, the equipment was so expensive. So to actually own the equipment was very, daunting. So what I would do is just go hang out in the music store, so much to the fact that they just let me be. So they just, I started knowing the equipment is, if they had too many customers, they'd be like, oh, ask Che to help you. He's got it,
Okay, so at this point, like, you're doing sort of like loop-based production, kind of 4-bar loops, souls, drum programming, stuff like that?
I would say probably a little bit more expanded than that, but I would say 4-track production, because back then, this is a different time. So it was 4-track on a Tascam Porta Studio. So we would, you'd loop based in terms of the fact that you would just overdub stuff into other tracks and so forth. But it would be pretty, extensive productions, because I had an imagination.
That's and it's amazing, right? That Porta Studio, that 8-track, when that turns up in the 80s, like the amount of genres around the world that were born off, finally people could get a piece of affordable home studio gear. The whole street soul thing in the UK, a lot of indie rock in different places. Like, so in that, but here's a question though, like, why did you want to make beats?
A friend of mine, who's actually still a close friend to this day, if anyone's familiar with Drake's satellite radio station, he's the one who put Drake's radio station together. He focused on, he got into it for DJing. And so I bought his former set of turntables. And then I noticed, and this was probably around the age of 15, I started listening to the records differently. I started listening to them like, who's putting this music together? How is it being put together? I wanted to really understand, how the music was being made, the construction of it. So I wasn't listening from the DJ anymore aspect of it, of like, oh, I want a DJ. I was listening to it, dissecting, like, what are the drums doing? What's the guitar doing? What's the bass doing? What's the keys doing? And so that's what really spurred the interest.
That's a major shift, right? Because suddenly, like, you're inside it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the secret world of the music is opening up.
Yeah, the thought process changed. It's like, one, you're just listening as a fan, and it's like, oh, I like this song. Now you're listening like, oh, how did they make this song? And I wanted to understand the process that goes on in that room and that goes on in this room, And
you imitate, you create, and then you innovate.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, it was definitely not that smooth, but yeah.
So this guy Teddy Riley, who's heard of Teddy Riley? Like the whole so Teddy Riley finds this guy.
Yeah.
And he gives him this contract, and he goes, oh, look, it's not a very good contract, but, this is going to be a great learning experience for you.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, your relationship with Teddy and what you learned from him?
Yeah, so the first opportunity that I got in the music business was this very established producer at the time, Teddy Riley. So if you've heard of New Jack Swing, he's the guy behind that sound. So Bobby Brown, Keith Sweat, all these legendary things, Guy, Blackstreet, Michael Jackson, actually. And so he offers me this deal. He literally goes in the back room, comes back with a contract. I was like, okay, great. All right. Contract. He says, literally, right, the first thing he does, he hands it to me. He says, it's not good. So I was like, okay, well, I appreciate the honesty. And his thing was like, you have to, his first contract wasn't good. He was like, you have to pay your dues and so on and so forth. So I was like, okay, showed it to my dad or whatever. My dad was like, hey, I don't know anything about this. So my stepmother was an attorney, but she was a Federal Labor Relations Authority attorney. She had no music business. So they were like, looks good to us. So I signed it. But it was a great learning experience. I still credit Teddy to this day for being the person that taught me the difference between just a groove or an idea and a song. What really encompasses a song in terms of melody, in terms of construction and arrangement. So that was like almost like my college, if you will. Yeah, I didn't get any placements with Teddy. I was with Teddy for a year. But I learned so much, and if it wasn't for Teddy, I wouldn't be here today in front of you guys, So.
Yeah. And by this point, there's a whole bunch of people around you in your world, and I guess who would you credit as some of the first significant people you worked with after that before Wyclef?
Well, I also have to give credit to Diddy, because I had met Diddy actually before I met Teddy, and I had never met a more fearless, more confident person at that age. We're about the same age, and I was just like, who is this guy? Like, is he nuts? He was just so confident. Everything that the way you see him now is exactly how he was then at 20, 21. And you're like, really? Like, what is this dude on drugs? Or because it was just, I had never met someone so just with that kind of self-belief, you know, and so that was very empowering. So just meeting him and knowing him and him saying like, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, we're going to be great, we're going to build this record company, and we're going to have all these great artists, and hearing someone, that put a battery in my back. So then I think Teddy gave me the tools, but I think Diddy helped give me the fire.
Yeah.
You know.
So that's the, and then, so, okay, so Teddy is like the work, you know, the practice, and like Diddy's the fire. But then the next thing is it's about luck and timing.
Oh, you know, my whole life is a testament of the stars aligning. I moved to New York. I worked in a music store for 3 weeks. I was on probation. We won't talk about that. So I had to have a job. Yeah, so I had to have a job. So I took a job at a music store because, once again, I knew the gear inside and out. So, you know, when in doubt, go to a music store. So I worked at this music store for 3 weeks, and Wyclef comes in. But at this point, I was already pretty, you know, at least in my own mind, I was pretty confident in my craft. So anyone I saw, I would be like, hey, let me play you some music. So I'd stopped him, you know, he's trying to buy something. I'm like, yeah, forget that. Let's come, you got to listen to this, right? So he's like, who's this kid? Like, you know, and actually, I had actually known quite a few people by the time I had met Wyclef. So, you know, it's like the kind, you know, the crazy guy at the music store, right? It's like talking, you know, to some famous guy, you know. But I was literally that guy. So I pull him over. He's like, well, what are you doing? I play him the music. He loves it. He's like, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I got to have a job. He said, so he's like, oh, so he gave me a job. And, you know, and I started working with Wyclef. So it was literally the timing of him coming in the store and all that, you know, and the stars aligning. But the key point of that is being prepared in the moment. You know what I mean? It's like preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah, you got to be ready. You got to be ready. And it's interesting, right? Because during this period of time, all these people, it's going from celebrities, something you would have seen on the screen or on the billboards or that. Then suddenly they're people in real life, and you're in the room with them, and they've got real problems, and actually, like, you can relate to them quite easily.
You can, and I think it's how you approach people. Because if you approach two in the wrong way, then someone's like, more, get away from me. You know, and if you approach them in a more, you know, relaxed, you know, manner and so forth, you know, I think I was good at that.
Okay, so what's the time period between working with Wyclef and working with Lauren on the miseducation of Lauryn Hill?
Probably about a year, I would say. And in that time, I got to meet Lauren and know Lauren and build a relationship with her. But I would say it was probably within about 2 months that I had my first placement working with Wyclef. So, and that was his Carnival album. That was my first actual placement. I had worked on other records that had come out, but there were other people's records that I just helped on. This was my first actual placement.
Did I see a M People record in your discography?
Does anyone know who M People is? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was big. It was big here for a bit.
Okay.
A little window.
Yeah, I have a lot of random things like that I've done. I've K-pop and other things. And
yeah, so
I just like music.
Yeah. It's cool.
You might see a folk record one of these days. I don't know. You never know.
Someone call Marlon Williams. Let him know.
Yeah.
So and obviously the Miseducation, Lauryn Hill. I mean, that's a record that was huge here, huge around the world, changed a lot of people's lives. What did that whole process of making that do for you?
It was the first time that I would say I worked on a project. You know, at that point I had worked on a song. You know, so to the challenge of a body of work was something new to me. I hadn't had that challenge yet. We walked in. Well, we had worked on a couple of songs together before we did this album. We did a remix for this artist named Andrea Martin, who was signed to Arista, which is Clive Davis. So Clive was the one that kind of first gave Lauren some production opportunities. So the second record we did was A Rose is a Rose for Aretha Franklin. And so that was literally the second record I'd ever done with Lauren. We did it in her mother's attic, her mother's upstairs.
And, I mean, Clive's like that generation that functioned on instinct.
Yeah, you know, he's the one that gave L.A. Reid, L.A. Reid and Babyface their first opportunities for him to label, and he's also the one that gave Diddy his
And this whole thing of like functioning on instinct or working on instinct is in contrast with numbers-based assessment. We'll talk about this more later on, but that's something we'll come back to later.
Yeah, I think, the world has changed, right? So it is a numbers and data and metrics game now, and that's, there's some sadness to that, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, so I guess Lauren I feel like what I heard was she was basically like, I'm into soul, I'm into reggae, and I like Wu-Tang hip-hop.
Yeah, that's literally day one. So day one Lauren session for her album. She walks in the room, she looks at me, and it's another guy, me and James Poyser from The Roots. We're in the room, we're just like, kind of like, we're kids, we're just like excited to be there. We're like, hey, all right, what are we doing? She's like, I like soul music, I like reggae, and I like Wu-Tang. Go to work. So we were like looking at each other, and then she's like starts humming something, and then before you know it, ding ding ding, it becomes dun dun dun, and that becomes doo-wop. And then the first record we did on the first day of working on her album was doo-wop.
Incredible stuff.
Good day.
It must have felt good, right?
Yeah, it was a good day. It was a good start. Good start to the project.
Yeah. So that
that project. You also have to remember, we were kids. We were fearless. Like we didn't know any better. We didn't know what we were, creating. We were just trying to do something cool. We didn't, that's the one thing I want to say. We were kids. We had no fear.
And that whole thing of like creating environments in which artists can be fearless, and protecting them so that they can create without like that sort of thing. I suppose that's something else that we can talk about a bit later on also, which I imagine you're doing a bit of with Workshop.
Yeah, that's definitely the goal with the company.
Yeah. So this incredible record comes out, changes people's lives everywhere, and things continue moving along for you, I suppose. Who's the next significant figure, do you think, after Lauren?
Well, the Lauren thing created opportunities for all of us. For me, one of the things right around this time, this was like 98, I think the record came out, preparing. I got married in 99 and had my first child in 99. My wife's in the audience, by the way. I think life-wise, I was thinking like, okay, I need to bring a little more structure to my life. So I'd met this guy, David Kahn, who's also like a legendary producer. Everybody from Paul McCartney to Sublime and so forth. And he was, Sugar Ray, as a matter of fact. But he was the head of A&R at Warner Brothers Records. So, he talked to me about, hey, do you ever want to be in A&R? And at that point, I hadn't had a job since, Sam Ash Music, you know what I mean? So, so I was like, and we talked about it, and we talked about, he was like a true sort of record company person, like meaning like true believer in like true A&Ring and things, and the craft of making records and all that. So I spent some time, lengthy time in talks with David, and I ended up taking this job at Warner Brothers as an A&R, and that was really the next significant thing. I mean, I did a bunch of records in between there. Like, I think I had done Destiny Child's No No No, I'd done Ghetto Superstar, I'd done a bunch of records in there, and then went on to this next sort of challenge.
Just casually in between challenges. Just casually.
I just wanted to make it seem like it wasn't just, sitting around. I was working.
He was working hard.
Yeah.
What did you learn from the A&R experience?
Warner was very challenging because at the time they were preparing to go through a merger with AOL. So I got a crash course in like corporate politics. The A&R part of it was good, in terms of like researching and finding. This was pre-internet really, or at the beginning of the internet or whatever, in terms of like researching. We had this amazing woman who was doing data research way before her time. Like the heads of the label were like, "What does this woman do?" And now every label has a research department. But like David had hired her because he saw the significance in it back then. And so the A&R side of it was great. I mean, during this time, they signed Linkin Park, they signed Green Day. So I was there when all these groups were coming in, and it was like, an amazing time in music with some of this stuff. But the politics of it was like, whoa. It's just like, where where business and numbers takes over, above creativity and people and things of that nature.
And I'm sure plenty of us here are familiar with record label politics.
But great learning experience.
Yeah. It sounds like an awesome learning curve. And
I guess, if you're going to swim, get in the deep end, right? You just figure it out.
Then this German guy, Hans Zimmer, that's an interesting plot twist. Like, you go and work for him.
Yeah, that goes back to that fearlessness, some delusion, some fearlessness. What happened is I had an opportunity to score a movie, and like anybody, at this, I met a director, and he's like, "Hey, I like your stuff. I like the music you've done on these records." And he's like, "Have you ever done do you know how to score a movie?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." In my mind, I'm like, how hard can it be? It was literally one of the most challenging moments of my entire life, sitting here trying to figure out how to score this movie. So I scored this movie not knowing absolutely anything about what I was doing, but it came out pretty good. And then I scored another movie, and a British movie, and then same thing, really had no idea what I was doing. So I just did some research on composers, and I showed up at Hans's doorstep. The only thing that really helped me, I think I would have never gotten in if I didn't have the Grammy. I think the Grammy, so I think that's where the Grammy came in handy. I used the Grammy to get in the door. And then it was like I got a meeting.
Like as a doorstop.
Yeah, essentially, because I know they were like, who is this guy? Who's this kid? Like, who's this kid calling? Who's this kid who keeps calling? And I got a meeting, and I think he really felt my passion. And, I'm not a classically trained composer by any means, but he gave me a shot. He let me come in. He gave me a room up there and a home for 2 years.
Yeah,
so it was great.
And you worked on a lot of projects, right?
A lot of projects. I did a lot of commercial work too, though. I did a lot of stuff for commercial and TV, and it was a great learning experience because at that time they were very technologically advanced in the way they worked. I think that was one of his talents, is that he was so early in embracing technology. So they were doing stuff with computers that I had never, had never seen. And I was like in there like, whoa. So it was great. Just sitting in with him sometimes would just be breathtaking.
Yeah, and I suppose the thing with this is it's cinematic music work.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that moving forward from that, if that created any shifts or changes in how you thought about making beats, producing songs, like that sort of the cinematic kind of quality.
Well, I mean, it definitely fit in with the Dre stuff, I was able to actually use a lot of my Hans Zimmer sounds, if you will, that I gathered during that time with Hans when I went over to Dre. So on like Game's first album and some of those 50 records, there's a lot of like those Hans Zimmer sounds in there. I would say, but what I did learn about the composers is, although they were doing all this big, gladiator type music and that triumphant stuff and the big orchestra stuff, they were actually chameleons. They had to know how to do everything. So if the song called for a techno track, they had to do that. If they so they were really talented across the board, and that was pretty amazing to see that.
And I guess that was probably sort of part of the value for him in bringing you, and you could bring all these more modern production techniques.
Well, he would just hand me stuff and be like, "Che, make it cool." So that was my job, to make it cool.
Yeah. So this guy, he goes from Hans Zimmer to working with Dr. Dre. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I was in LA, so
Yeah. So, and I guess like Dre, like you're getting in the studio working on music with groups of people.
Yeah, Dre works with like a small team. So it was about, when I first started with Dre, it was me, Dre, and Mike Elizondo. But I also worked closely with a classically trained keyboard player from New York named Mark Batson. So I brought Mark in with me, a little, like maybe 6 months later. And then it was Mark, me, Dre, and Mike Elizondo, and then Scott Storch sometimes. So it was a really, really amazing and talented team.
Scott Storch, who was originally the keyboard player for The Roots, and produced some of the most amazing club hip-hop records of the early 2000s. Yeah. Incredible melodies, eh?
Yeah, talented guy. Still a good friend.
Yeah. And so how long were you working with Dre for?
8 years. 8 years. So that's a couple of Eminem records, some 50 Cent records, The Game, Busta Rhymes, Gwen Stefani. I'm trying to think what else. Maybe Mary. I think that's kind of my tenure.
Yeah. And I guess at some point during this period of time, you start getting to know this guy. You might have heard of him, Kanye West.
Yeah, I'd actually met Kanye before I met Dre, honestly, when he was still just coming up, when he was still mostly Kanye the producer. So I met him in New Jersey. And so I knew him, but not well, And then when I left Dre, Dre was sort of more focused on beats. The headphones were taken off. So he wasn't really doing music much. We'd go to the studio every day, and we'd make music, but it was never coming out. So it was like, all right, am I going to stay here and just keep, Dre's wealth was just accumulating. So his ambition in terms of keeping putting out records has kind of diminished. So I still had that, I was still gung ho about making music. So I left Dre and then had a conversation with Kanye. Actually, the first conversation was more fashion related than it was about music. And, I was helping him with potentially some investment with his clothing company. And he had no business plan. He had no, in true Kanye fashion, he was just like, hey, I'm going to do a clothing company, but he had nothing. So I was like, well, I can't get you investment right until you get that part together, get a business plan together or something. And then, he was like, well, I got this record label. You want to help me with that? I was like, all right, let's go. And that's and I worked with Kanye for 8 years.
Yeah, and that's good music.
Yeah, good music.
So at what point in the good music timeline did you tap in?
I would say right around Watch the Throne. So I ended up going on the Watch the Throne tour. I didn't work on that record, but that's when we started doing a bunch of records. So that's when we started Yeezus. That's when we started Cruise Summer album. So Lamborghini Mercy, all those records, Click. I was responsible for all that.
Yeah, and these guys were going all around the world to make albums.
Yep.
Like Cruel Summer, Hawaii. They were in Paris for Yeezy.
Yeah, we recorded most of Yeezy in Paris. We recorded Cruel Summer in Qatar, London, everywhere.
So I suppose that's
and mostly in hotels.
And that's the other thing, I guess, that's going on in the background of all of this. You grow up in Boston, you move to Virginia, you end up in LA, and next thing you know, you're going all around the world on all these different projects.
Yeah, it was. For a kid from inner city of Boston, it's just like you're living. That phrase people say, "living the dream." I'm in New Zealand right now. It's like So it just showed me that anything is possible. You just have to work on your craft. Fortunately, I think I was good at what I did, but at the same time, that anything is possible. And the way Kanye thinks, anything is possible. You know what I mean? You'd be like, well, we're going to Qatar. What are we doing in Qatar? I don't know. We'll figure it out. Let's shoot a movie.
Yeah,
so we did, and we shot a movie. We shot videos.
I guess in that sense, he's one of these characters like Diddy, where it's just like the whole thing was having that clear vision and the conviction to just push through, no matter what's going on around.
Yeah, literally, not taking no for an answer, ever. Yeah, ever. This guy would, he'd call you at 2 a.m, Che, I need African drums on this song. And you'd be like, all right, I'll get on it in the morning. No, I need it now. You'd be like, it's 2 a.m. He's like, so this is somebody who can do African drums somewhere in the world right now.
Wake them up.
Yeah, wake them up. Or they're awake because they might be in another part of the world where they're, so that's how he thought. And it's impressive, for someone to have that type of, it really is impressive in its affection, because when I'm working with my company or my team and they say, oh, I can't get this, so I can't figure it out. And I'm like, no, yes, you can. Trust me, we've made.
Yeah, I did it. You can do it too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and alongside this is you're working with people like The Weeknd, A$AP Rocky, this sort of whole new generation. And I guess that's the other thing too. You've worked with several different generations of hit artists over the last 20 odd years. So what do you personally do to be able to keep on adapting and evolving as the trends shift, new artists emerge, the world changes?
I think my biggest strategy is just that I work with a lot of new artists, a lot of emerging artists, and I think that's infectious. That once again, that fearlessness of being just young and not knowing any better, and obviously they're in tune to whatever's going on, because I'm very I have a generation of producers and songwriters that I work with that I came up with, right? And some of them are very, critical of the younger generation. And I get, I came up in a very amazing time during music. So everyone can, has their opinions of this generation's music or that generation's music. And, I'm sure the 60s and 70s had their opinion of the 80s and 90s, Well, with that said, I think of it as textures and sort of, if we're talking about colors, it's like, what are you painting with, right? So to me, if the kids are painting with, green, yellow, and red, that's what the kids are painting with. That's the textures. So if you're trying to still work with the kids, and you're not painting in that textures, they're not hearing you. And that's just the case. So you have to be able to, find that middle ground where you could still communicate with them. And meaning, you don't want to come in the room and play a track and they're like, oh, that's the old guy playing that.
It's interesting too, though, right? Because there's the new sound or whatever is happening in the moment. But then there's always a period of time, usually 20, maybe 25 years earlier, which is suddenly trending as throwback. Yeah. And quite often you can combine the two. That's an interesting thing too as well, like knowing the points in history you can pull into the present and really have an impact.
You almost have to sneak that in, though. You have to almost know that that's happening without them knowing it. You know what I mean? Because, somewhere along the line, everyone started calling me OG, and I was like, all I heard was old guy. I was like, wait, who's that? Who you talking?
Oh my God.
Now I take it as a form of endearment, but at first it wasn't. It was offensive.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure a bunch of us can relate to that. Being called a big bro by someone like a foot taller than you.
Yeah. But definitely, that's definitely been my purpose, I think, is to work with emerging artists.
Yeah,
I like working with the big names too, but my purpose is to work with emerging artists.
Yeah, create the new pathways. And this is sort of in the context of the current company, Workshop.
Yeah.
So how old is Workshop now?
7 months.
7 months new, and it's based in Detroit.
Based in Detroit. And launched the same day that Motown was created, but 63 years later.
Yeah. Place with incredible musical history, and it was great. When I was looking this guy up, I was looking on his Instagram, and he kept posting about Underground Resistance, which is like a seminal Detroit techno movement. And I was like, oh man, this is cool. We're going to have a great conversation.
Yeah. Love those guys. I met them in Paris during Red Bull Academy, and they, same thing. They were telling me about, Detroit in late 70s, early 80s, and when, the stuff was created, and just all the stuff that was going on in the community. And you think about that and how the music was their outlet and their escape, and just, and then how they, he told me the story of how they went from there to Berlin, and they, people were throwing their music over the wall and stuff like that. And that's how the other side was, the East, it's an amazing story.
Yeah, so a place of incredible rich musical histories and a multitude of genres. And that's the base of operations.
The home of Eminem.
Yeah. So do you want to talk for a bit about what's happening in Workshop?
Yeah. So Workshop is an idea based on, I'd learned all this stuff from my journey, if you will, from being with Dre for a certain amount of time. And with Dre was, Aftermath was through Interscope. So I worked a lot with Interscope and Jimmy Iovine and met them. Same thing so now fast forward to working with Kanye, working with Def Jam, and that's same thing. It's Universal, it's Def Jam, and you're meeting all these longtime record executives, Barry Weiss and all these legendary people, and you're learning all this stuff. But what I'm also learning, it's from this traditional record company sort of viewpoint, kind of like almost old school way of thinking. And I'm seeing how tough it is on the artist side. I'm the one sometimes who is closest to the artist. So I get to hear all their gripes and their the ups and downs and what they went through. And then being the guy at the label also too. So on one hand, I'm like, I'm wearing both hats. And I think Workshop was, for me, an opportunity to build something where I was like, I really wanted to serve the emerging artist community. And the idea behind it is just that. It's literally to provide resources for artists where there are no resources. because now everyone's looking at, you could come in, back in the day, someone could walk in a room and sing a song and be like, oh my, you get the goosebump moments and be, oh, I got to sign this artist. Now, if they do that, the question they're going to ask you is, what's your Instagram numbers? What's your streams look like? Are you on TikTok? So I was like, there has to be a company that can provide resources for those artists that, maybe they spent more time on their guitar than they did on TikTok, those artists. So I really wanted to, and this is a fascinating story. So then I learned, okay, this company I wanted to do is not fundable. So, I presented this company and I had this idea, and investors were like, oh yeah, that sounds great, but no thanks. So I realized I actually had to change what the company was, and I had to add these other facets to it. So now Workshop is I call it a music-based lifestyle company, because we have a clothing line coming out, we have products, so we also are a content creation company. So I had to really make it more of a Web 3.0 company, where it's more about sort of the monetization of content and products than necessarily just, investing in music. So that was a fascinating thing to me, learning more about the reality of the relationship between resources and IP. And we're talking about emerging artists, so we're talking about IP that doesn't exist yet. Or, it's like a possibility of IP. And so it's been a fascinating journey, because it took me 3.5 years to get the company funded. And now we're up and running, and time will tell. But it is a company that we're talent first. So there is not a data thing about it at all. It's literally investing in talent and going back to your instincts and your passion.
Yeah, for sure. And with the we talked about this a bit last night with the whole the idea of success or people succeeding. You've got, first of all, you've got talent. Talent's like this dust that's just sprinkled over the world. Yeah. Some people have it, some people don't. There's work ethic. You can develop that. You can work harder at your craft. And then there's luck and timing. Yeah. And so, how do you see, having seen so many of these moments, where everything's come together over the time and these things have happened? What have you identified? Well,
there's some unique. If you think about the success of this person, this person, this person, this person, there are some unique common traits. One of the things that I've learned, that I've thought about, is obviously first of all, is talent, but also a sense of identity. You know what I mean? If I talk about Billie Eilish, or I talk about The Weeknd or something like that, they had a sense of who they were. The other thing, they were able to assemble really good people around them. So their teams were really good. So if The Weeknd was good at the music, then, Sal was good at the management and Cash was good at this part, So they assembled these really good teams around them. Same thing with Billie, the people that she worked with early. And I think that's just as important as really as an artist. It's like understanding what you're good at and what you're not good at. And then it's like having that true self-realization of being able to truly, because we're all kind of crazy. So we all think we're great at everything. But if you can really truly say oh, you know what, I'm really good at this, but I'm not great at social media, and knowing that okay, that's where I need to bring some help in. And I think the unique across these people is that in terms of, the stars aligned, but they also had the team. They also put together a really good team to grow.
Yeah, they're prepared. And I guess it's a difficult one also, because when someone's starting out, maybe they don't have the resources or the incentive to offer people to be part of their team.
That's the talent. That's where the talent comes in. It's like you show them how good you are. And then people will work for they'll see it and be like, hey, I want to be part of this,
So with this company, like you said, it's not data led, it's like instinct, it's about talent. But then you have to get that talent and you've got to connect it with audiences. Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about what your approach is to that right now in 2022, finding audiences, connecting with audiences?
Yeah, I have a very unique vantage point, because obviously I spent this time with Kanye and those guys, but I'm also an executive at DistroKid. So DistroKid is like going into a whole new world, because it's a platform. It's more like the founder of it, he sort of thinks of it like a tool, like Dropbox. So it's a very tool to get your music out there and so on and so forth. So all he wants to do is continue to create tools to help artists, similar to what Spotify is trying to do with their various tools that they're using to really try to power independent artists. What I've learned is there's no one right way, right? What works for you is not necessarily going to work for her. But what I do know is that shared information, that knowledge base of that information, everybody needs to know. So if you know about touring and she knows about playlisting, you guys need to share the information, because the information is the power. You don't know what it's going to be that's going to be the one that works for you, but you got to know it. And so as an independent artist, you have to apply pressure everywhere. So for instance, you can't afford to be on TikTok and not be on Instagram, because you don't know where your audience is going to be or where they're going to find you. So you have to apply pressure everywhere, and then pay attention to the data, because it is a data metrics game. You have to know, how do you drive data? Obviously there's times where if you have funding or you have some resources, where to pay for ads. I like to do a lot of what I consider guerrilla marketing, which is sort of the low cost digital ads that you could buy across platforms, and then using social media to repopulate everything. So for instance, if we bought, a campaign, I'm speaking hypothetically, but let's say we had something running on a site like, if we're talking hip hop, let's say like World Star. And then I would take the World Star site and then have a bunch of people repost the posting that we bought, so you see all this organic growth. And I don't suggest ever using bots, because they have fraud detection of being able to back use that. And then if you use bots, you get penalized for that, right? If you're on Spotify, they take away all your even legitimate streams. So I don't suggest, there's a lot of opportunities out there to use bots to sort of get views and do that. I really don't suggest you doing that. I know the amount of money that DistroKid has invested into anti-fraud. So, and I'm sure Spotify has even tripled that amount, and Apple's probably tripled that amount. So I would never, and YouTube's even same thing, about triple that amount. So I would definitely not advise using bots. You can be clever with your strategies of how you do it, in terms of, follow the guidelines. Like, Spotify says pitch 2 weeks in advance, pitch 4 weeks in advance, get to the front of the lines of these playlists to get to these editors. You'll be surprised how much traction you have by literally using all these tools that are available to you. Spotify for Artist tools, all these different things out there. I would use everything that you can, but information is power. So educate yourself on every aspect of it. If you want to know more about playlisting, do your homework, do your research, find the strategies to pitch. There are companies that will pitch for you, but sometimes to me it's almost like, well, they're not doing anything you can't do. You just need to learn how to do it, what they're doing. Other things for me, I'm a big fan of organic growth, so I'm definitely a big fan of like playing shows and getting out there locally, and then also taking, getting emails and taking contacts. So
do you want to give them the designer example?
Yeah, this is a great example. So there's an artist we signed at Good Music named Designer, who had a song that people might have heard of called Panda. It went crazy virally. The label and the managers were so focused on just monetizing this record, they really didn't take advantage of the artist that they had. So the artist was from Brooklyn, and he was Caribbean. So that means he had, the Caribbean community. You have Brooklyn, which are very loyal fan bases. They did not take any time to invest to nurture that. And so therefore they just chased the money, versus maybe, I'm not saying not to promote the record and not to, make the record go as big as it can be, but you also have to, build this kid's actual fan base, because he didn't have genuine fans. He had fans of a song. They weren't fans of him. And so he needed to convert those fans into a true fan base. And so and Brooklyn is a loyal community. The Caribbean community worldwide is a very loyal community. So if they had established that, for him, he would have, you're talking about a guy who could have been a worldwide artist now, with a continuing career. That song went up and came down just as fast as it did, and so Designer got dropped, and he's still working. He's still out there, independently, and he's still trying to do some EDM stuff, but literally they missed a huge opportunity. And I think it's important to really understand the community that you're in, so for instance, if you're a New Zealand artist, it's like, make sure you you have the foundation of your community. Then grow, grow from there, because you want to have a base, and that's the people that are going to be the most loyal to you.
Okay, everybody, friends, colleagues,
Yeah.
we have a round of applause for Shape Hope.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to have a very short break now. Coming up after the break, 11:45 in this room, is a panel on composers, music synchronization and publishing. Downstairs is making great data-driven decisions, which is awesome. Lead in from Shay. Thank you very much. Please join me again in thanking our amazing guest, Shay Pope.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta.
Oh, short. I know. I felt like we just get started.
Yeah. They 20 minutes.
Oh.
Whatever reason that you truck was doing to get going this morning.
Yeah.
No, that's it.
That's good though. That's good.
How you doing? Yeah. No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm going to be here all day. I got a panel or something. Yeah. Well, I think that's, to me, it's always been my formula, because I draw inspiration from a lot of places, but I definitely mine, my era for real, 60s and 70s. So when I go to the record store, that's all I'm in, because there's so much, I don't know if it was a psychedelic time or whatever, but there's just so much amazing, things to, exactly. So I try to look to the past to create the future. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, well, I just somewhat say, the past had more of a future than the present.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you take the songs and I think project is some time and I can take a song and write it so well that just to make one song.
Everyone needs some support, right?
It's still like where I'm coming from. It's really
Oh, awesome, yeah. Amazing.
But I love how you talk about
That's great. That's amazing. Yeah, pleasure to meet you.
because I know how
He's doing that work. That's the work that needs to be done.
Yes, the bedrock. I don't really necessarily understand, like, you know, just like you say, you're reworking them, and like, what are you creating? And then who's the artist in it? Yeah, I got you. Yeah, so presenting this reworked version. Yeah. Well, good luck with that. It sounds very challenging. Yeah, that's very challenging. But good luck with Yeah, we're just trying to It's almost like you have to have to show. It's almost like you have to do it the other way. So it's like you have to have to show the other place and then bring it to the public. So then they see like, oh, this has an outlet. So now we're if you do it the other way, you don't have an outlet. That's something that they can even say, I'm not interested in. They can easily take their idea. Because they understand. Interesting idea. Hello. I'm Luca. Nice to meet you. Yeah, thank you. We had shorter time than until Monday. I'll be around. Not too much. I don't think maybe a little bit. Well, we were just one photo up. Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna do something. We're going to. I don't know the name of the island. White. We're going there. Yeah. They might see on the mountain or something. Yeah. It's probably fun taking the you know how it is. Well, I met the studio manager, so now I like actually this room is great. I actually want to work on it downstairs. If I can everyone to work. I brought my record. Good. You got idea?
From the label saying, I believe LVCO. Yeah. I'm like only just I just got like laid out.
Hello? Hello? Microphone check. Microphone check. Kick off the next shortly. Please do take the seats. Please do take... Join... Are you talking into it? Are you talking into it? Try the other one. Try the other one. There'll be an audio technician along shortly. I just keep talking into the microphone and then...
It's just you, Dylan.
We're just doing a microphone check. Can we get some... Are you guys talking? How was your morning? Did you talking to the microphone at the same time, and then we'll figure it out. You know, and, yeah, eventually. So you found a good coffee place?
Hello, hello.
Check.
Yeah, that's
Hi,
you.
hi.
I think, no.
Excuse me.
Is that,
Check.
I don't think it's working.
Check.
Is this working?
Oh, microphone check.
Is number 6 working? Number 6?
Hello there.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hello.
Good after evening.
Yes, it just appears there were people talking. Good morning. I'm just a quick introduction for this next panel, which is the Music Publishing and Composer Career Development panel. Take it away. I believe, Tim, you're running the session. Very good. Have fun.
Well, thanks. Hi, I'm Tim. We're here to talk a bit about composers and publishers and music supervisors and how they work together to develop composer careers. My background is I work for a company called Disco, which is a music tech tool used by all of these people. And I also have a publishing company in the States. And that's a bit about me. And we'll move on to Penny. Tell us just a bit about your role over at Native Tongue / Concord now.
My role is General Manager New Zealand, so I look after the publishing copyright of our writers in New Zealand and their interests and the day-to-day running of our office. So a bit of A&R, a bit of sync licensing and all the things kind of in between.
Hi, I'm Amine Raymer. I'm an independent music supervisor at States of Sound, and I am the person that will go to Penny or Teo to license the copyright and find a good composer for some of my projects.
Kia ora. My name is Teo Sivizati. I'm a director for War Publishing. I was 20 years in London working for the company, and I moved to Aotearoa in January. And as a publishing company, we represent composers and look after their careers.
Well, thanks. It's really awesome having Teo move all the way from the UK and bring his background experience as well. And Armine's recently returned from LA and is now back and forward between both places. So we've got some nice international experience happening here. And then, well, Penny's been cracking the music industry here forever. So, Penny, can you tell us fundamentally what a music publisher actually does and what you do for your composers?
Yep, sure. So for people who don't know, maybe, we represent the publishing copyright, which is basically the composition of a song. It's the music, melody, lyrics, that sort of thing, as opposed to a master recording, which is what you hear of that composition. So in publishers essentially collect the royalties on that copyright from their territory that they're in, and they have reciprocal relationships around the world where they collect it, so they account to their writers. They also do a bit of A&R, where they will set writing sessions up for their writers so they can go and write with other people, and then they might get hit songs from that sort of thing. And then they also with the songs that are created, they exploit those songs by working with, say, advertising agencies and things like that to sync the song to film or an ad or something like that. So essentially selling the song to make money. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, and just to add to that, the copyright for songs develop and generate a lot of money sort of in the background of the industry. You hear about the recordings and the recording artists, but they're not always writing their songs, obviously, and probably a lot of you know that anyway. And there's all this industry in the background collecting what they produce. Teo, could you tell us a bit about how Warp works with their composers, how you find them and develop their careers, and what are the key steps to actually getting a composer to the point of success?
Yeah, so Warp is Warp Publishing is a sister company to a record label which is from the UK called Warp Records, and so the publishing company started initially representing those artists. And over the years that was expanded. I suppose initially we represented a lot of what you would call non-traditional composers, which is probably someone who's put more emphasis on being a recording artist in the initial stages of their career, or a songwriter, and has then wanted to move into composition for ads or films. So I suppose our role is to help the artist figure out, how do you get into that process, and that's exactly what a lot of people here are, trying to figure out. And our role is to just, provide some, obviously, ideas, encouragement, and in partnership with the artist, find that journey. Exactly, just make sure that we make Amine aware. But I guess the fundamental part, I guess, that relates to Warp is that it's the uniqueness of the artist's sound that is the determining factor in terms of working with a composer, and that's true for all of our signings. But in terms of the score side of things, you're looking for someone who can work collaboratively. So first you find someone who you think has got a unique sound. Second, you work out, how you can, how they might enjoy working in a collaborative way, which is what is needed.
How do you discover composers and talent? How have you in the past sort of come across these people?
I think if it's obviously watching, as much, film and television and, any of that, because you might find someone there has a first experience. But apart from that, it's very similar to, the way the record label would approach it. Anyone who comes on our radar that, feels is doing something completely unique is what we're looking for.
Got you. Amine, so Amine's on the other side of the table here, as far as she's the one that gives the money to the composers for doing work. And how do you find, how much do you do with composers on the films and things that you work on versus licensing existing music? And then how do you find composers when you need them to work on a job?
Mostly on independent films and sometimes on the TV projects, I'm asked by the studio or the director to recommend composers. That's probably 50-50. Often they'll have worked with someone in the past and I'll come onto the project and they already have chosen the composer. But when I am asked for suggestions, I'll go to composer agents and publishers and first of all, I think about the tone of the show or the film and who I think would be good artistically. Then I call around everyone and ask how that person has been to work with, other supervisors. So to Teo's point about working collaboratively, word gets out good and bad. If it's like, this is my art and I'm not taking any notes and I have created this for this scene, we tend to move on from that. And just because directors and producers and there's so many notes in the process and voices, so the the list is, there's a huge amount of composers out there, but a lot of it is personality. The talent has to be there, but then the personality has to work as well. So yeah, so it's sort of like we talk amongst ourselves, and then obviously it starts with the artistic vibe of the composer. We'll listen to previous work. So yeah, it's quite, I'd say, hard to break into that, but it's not impossible because,
there's a lot of new people coming through all the time.
Yeah, and it's especially if they're easy to work with and they've got the talent.
When you do find the composer that you want to work with, what's the process? Or, Penny, when someone's coming to you, hey, I want to use your composer in this film, how does that work between you and the composers usually?
So we check their availability because, of course, they could be working on something else. Whether they feel that they can do the project justice as well, because you want them to feel comfortable with who they're working with. And then we tend to take the business side out of, like the composer isn't involved in the negotiations or things like that, because that's kind of like the business side, and sometimes that can affect the creativity, and we always just make sure that we're negotiating so that both parties are happy with the end result. And we get requests from everywhere, so it could even be like a short film for an ad or something like that, or it could be a full feature film or whatever. It comes from any place. It could be that the composer even has had his mate go, I'm going to make a film and I want to give him mates rates, but we still start at the full process and go through it, and then provide the terms to the composer to say yay or nay. Yeah.
Gotcha. What are some of the things, I guess, Teo and even Amine, from your perspective, well, let's start with you, Teo, what do you actually do with a brand new composer that they have never scored anything before, and you're trying to get that first job? How do you prepare them, or do you give them homework? What's that sort of, what do you do?
Obviously the first stage is presenting the work that they have already done in a professional way. Also figuring out if there's any material that they haven't released that might help present a broader scope of what they're doing, because a lot of the time, as Shay Pope highlighted, even for him, it's about being able to cover a lot of different grounds musically. So probably the first step is, what do you have that you have made? And sometimes from that, you might go, okay, actually, we need to expand a little bit, and, we need more material to be able to present a broader picture of what you're doing. But I think some of the possibilities that I guess are not always explored, which I think would be, useful for people here to know, is, if you're commissioning any videos or working with anyone on the film side, just try and expand on that relationship. Let people know that you're interested in doing bespoke work that people won't necessarily know that. Keep them updated about what you're doing, and that's the director, but that's also maybe the editor or anyone involved in that. Could be at some point wanting. They're all working in an industry where they want to do new projects, probably starting out. So that's a really good one. If someone contacts you, let's say Amine contacted you and there was a project where they wanted to use a lot of your music or your music quite prominently, not a bad idea to perhaps say, actually, I have all this music that's unreleased in case it could fit somewhere else in the film. That's a little bit of an intermediary step towards fully scoring. It's more say, okay, you like my sound, here is more of my sound, and or you have a friend that you're hearing, a friend, someone an artist who has a job, probably will be very busy doing the job, might be up for getting a bit of help, if you can work with them on parts of it.
Yeah, and Amine, what do you sort of like to see from the other side? How do they actually show you what they could do?
I think especially if they haven't scored anything in the past, there's a risk to the production and me recommending someone because we don't know what that workflow is going to look like. So getting a reel together, which Teo was saying, like putting something together to show me this is the range that they have, even if those visuals are stock footage that they've done, so I can see, okay.
So write music to stock footage, basically, just to have a go at it?
Yeah, because we're also looking at how they place the music to picture. So if they're composing, it's not just, oh, this is a great range of emotion from happy, sad, epic. It's like, okay, how do you place that within the moving visuals and that instinct? So I would be looking for that. And then, and especially if they haven't done something before, it is difficult to pass it on to the director without a body of work behind it. So it's a risk to the production, but it's also an opportunity to have something new and fresh. So usually the money will be lower because both sides are taking a risk, including the composer. Like it could turn out to be 6 months' work for very little money, and but that's going to give them their first credit, which then they can up the rate.
What are some of the? Just give us a bottom level of rate, and what do you generally see across what you work on?
I did a documentary called Woodstock '99. And we wanted a composer that could reflect the music of that time, but also compose for what was needed emotionally. And so about 2 years previously, I'd met with an artist that wanted to compose and didn't have any body of work behind him. And he was, it was Noel from the Cranberries. And I was like, 90s, yes, this could be perfect. Like 2 years later, I'm like, okay, I remember I met with him. And but knowing, he hadn't worked before as a composer to picture or cutting in with the visuals. So in that instance, I paired him up with someone who I knew had the skill to do that. They co-composed, but that fee was, I won't give away what the fee was, and I'll just say the range, because that was... and say for a documentary, I would say it's between 10 and 45,000. That's US. And say on you're talking about budget ranges for films. So if it's a $1 million film, you're looking more in the 20 to 40. If you're in a $10 to $15 million film, it should be in the 100 to 150, because usually that score might require recording studios, could be orchestral, you're hiring other musicians.
Is that budget including, that's not just a fee direct to composer,
No,
that's including actually recording it?
That's all of the costs to the composer. So I think, it is worth a career worthwhile pursuing. And then, as you know, you get the back-end royalties, so you have a passive income. I wish I was a composer.
Penny, with your composers that your native tongue's been signing, how are you guys finding them? And are you just looking in New Zealand mostly from your perspective? Tell us a bit about that process and how much you've actually been involved in it and your time there.
So I guess I predominantly look after A&R in New Zealand, so I'm only looking in this territory really. Actually, we've got some amazing composers, David Long, Plan 9, who are really well known in New Zealand. But one composer that I signed was Lachlan Anderson, who's actually from the band Die Die Die. And he was living in Berlin and got the opportunity to work on a project called Tabula Rasa, and he got a composer agent from that. And when he moved back to New Zealand, I got in touch and just talked with him and his agent to see if there was something that we could plug in there. I like to think of when you're signing A&R, you're becoming another part of a songwriter's or a composer's team. So you want to make sure that you actually can help their career, because if they've got everything established already and you can't plug in, then there's no point in clipping the ticket on something where you're not, providing something. And so, but that was a relatively easy process, and then we just work with him on kind of what areas he wants to work in, and we look for those opportunities just, through the relationships we have.
And in general, I think everybody probably will hope. Can you put into perspective, maybe Amine, from you, the odds of things landing? You're being pitched music constantly to place into the work, into the films and what have you that you're working on. How much you pitched and what percentage of that actually gets licensed? What are people up against here?
Probably 90-10, like 90%. 10% of the music that I'm pitched will make it into the project that I'm currently working on, but...
Is that because you've asked specifically for that particular music, or just random stuff that's coming at you?
Just random stuff, because I hope, trying to listen to everything as much as I can, but that will be because I'm specifically looking for a type of song or score. But again, with Woodstock, that was 2 years after the initial meeting, because I I was working on other things. I'm like, I don't think that would be right for that. Oh, here's something it'd be right for. So it's not, the percentage is higher overall, but it's quite difficult, because it's my opinion. I love this music. I'm presenting it to the director and the producer. They also have to love it, and then the studio has to love it, and the marketing department has to love it. So, it starts with me, but much like I'm being pitched music, what I've selected, I'm also pitching on to other people. But it's not a high percentage, but
So that being said, how important is it for composers and artists to actually have someone representing them, either to do the get score jobs or to get sync placements versus trying to do it themselves?
So helpful. Like, I'll go to Penny and Teo and say, hey, I'm looking for this type of song for this type of scene, or a composer that could work for this project. And I know they're going to go through their repertoire and people they know and narrow it down for me. If I listened through everything and talked to everyone that pitched me, I wouldn't actually have a job, because that would be my full-time job. So to have other gatekeepers filter for me is essential.
So Teo, how does Warp, how's it gone about over your time there, which is quite a while? How have you seen it progress as far as building those relationships across the industry to make stuff happen for your composers? How do you actually build the relationships?
So I guess when 20 years ago, there was a lot less focus on the sync and score side of the industry from the music industry's perspective. So it was actually a really small pool of contacts. And so
really fast, was the focus about getting stuff recorded?
Radio.
Essentially, like as a publisher, you were just trying to get songs recorded and on the radio?
I think sync was still, it was starting to become the big thing. But I think in that time, and that's partly why I have been focusing on the sort of composer side, is that the idea of the non-traditional composer, shifted from being something that is, happens really once in a blue moon, to something that's actually sought after and as something that is seen as
Johnny Greenwood.
Exactly. I think that's been one of the biggest shifts, where that has opened a lot of opportunities for a lot of our artists in that sense.
So the buyers were looking for more interesting, I guess, names to work with, as opposed to we just need score by someone in the background here that isn't as familiar.
Yeah, and I guess the obvious thing that a lot more content is being made and so that's obviously to the benefit. Obviously that doesn't mean that there's necessarily more money on each job, but there's maybe more places where you can, jumpstart your career.
And now a lot of directors want to hire the guy in their favourite band to be the composer, and we have to then vet that. Like, it's great, I love that you love that band, but can they cut in music? Can they work to deadline? Are they collaborative? And so now that's almost become just as big as traditional composers of directors and producers wanting artists, because they like the sound of that band, to compose for their TV show or the film.
What are some of the roadblocks that you come across with a composer coming from, they haven't done it before? What sort of, anyone that's new to this, what does their attitude need to be about this very different way of creating?
Yeah. I think the things that like the initial conversations, it's like, how is we'll ask like how they work with other people, how receptive to getting notes and feedback, and the feedback can be, I don't like that, and not constructive at all, or I'd like to see this build at this part. It might just be, I don't like it. Like, how do they respond to that when it is art? So I'll run through that with both the director and the producer, and then the potential composer. I'll be like, okay, here's the situation. If this happens, what is your response? And some people have been honest. They'll be like, no, I've done that and I like it, so that's it. And you're like, good to know. Moving on. Yeah. And often it's the just the practical side of it. When they're getting the reels, do they even have the technical ability? And if not, we often will suggest a music editor or someone they can work with, where they can. It's a score producer as well. So the artist will have a score producer. They'll watch the visual and come up with something or themes, and then they'll send that music over to their score producer, who will cut it to picture, rearrange those stems and smooth it all out. So in those situations, you have to have enough money on the table that they can hire someone to help them.
Tay, do you work with score producers? Is that sort of part of your crew, or is it mostly you've got the artist that's in there and that?
They're not part of our crew, but there's a little network of people who have sort of been collaborators with our artists that we can sort of recommend. I was going to say, in terms of the roadblocks, obviously being offered, or not necessarily being offered, but being in discussions for your first job is quite a it obviously is quite a big decision. And some of the questions that come might be oh, well, I have this recording session, I have this tour, I have all these other things, and then it can sort of come to a little bit of a dilemma. What should I prioritize? So it's something we try and sort of work through with the composer, or how much is this going to cost me to record? But I think really what it boils down to is really it's a quite crucial time to secure the job, because this is when, like, it's not that you need to have it all figured out, but there needs to be a certain amount of flexibility and determination to sort of find a path, that's the most, in terms of how you respond to something that comes in. If you don't have a first, if this is your first credit, this is the hardest one to get. It doesn't get necessarily that easy afterwards, but it will get a little easier. And so, it's almost like how you approach that. If you can get into a conversation with ourselves or the music supervisor and be open about those things in a way that you want to sort of make it work, that's a big part of why you're going to get hired.
Because then we can ask around and go, how were they to work on that project? And so that's just that first project is the hardest, because it's the biggest risk on the production side, to go with someone that doesn't or that hasn't had any previous experience. So if that is offered, even if it's not a great film or TV show, I would say yes, just to get that under your belt and the process done.
Yeah, when I get approached by quite young writers that want to become composers for film and TV, I always suggest that they go and contact a film school and find someone who's like-minded so they can grow their career with that director. Because I kind of feel like, they're writing music to evoke emotion to a visual, so they've got to have a really close relationship. And if you get in at that level and you grow together, then I think that makes things a lot easier. And it gives you that experience, and so you don't have to have that kind of almost like you have that personal kind of relationship from the start. You don't have to have that nitty-gritty kind of stuff when you're coming in later after being an artist or something. Yeah.
And then even if they didn't like, the person they're working with, they still have the visuals they can show to someone else.
Yeah.
Which is so much easier for us to then go, oh, here's something they did, even if no one's heard of that film, we can still sell it up the chain.
Yeah.
What are, I guess as a publisher, you were talking before out back just about kind of what you do day to day, and tell me about some of the sort of things you're actually doing for your artists sort of minute by minute, I suppose, to give us slightly more of an insight into the role.
I guess for me personally, I came from a radio background, and I like to try and make sure that I'm definitely helping the writer in all aspects where they don't have assistance. I don't know if this is the same in all publishing companies, but so if a publisher needs a publicist or a manager or a label, I'll go and talk to people to try and find that for them. I'll be trying to find them sync opportunities, which is, like talking to ad agencies to see if one of their songs might work for them or they can compose for that ad or something like that. Just basically kind of doing whatever I can to make their life easier on the business side of things so that they can concentrate on being creative. Because I think, when you're a creative, that business side can be hard and challenging, and it can be a roadblock to your creativity. So on a day-to-day basis, I'm just kind of like meeting with a lot of people and sending a lot of emails, pretty much.
Quite a lot of your composers unmanaged and unsigned, like on the recording side. Did you have quite a lot where you're sort of their only serious team member? Yeah,
we do have, because some of our composers are really, really well established, they don't need management. They've always been like that. They've done Lord of the Rings, that sort of thing. So they totally set up their own schedules and look after themselves. And then there's other people where we have a schedule and we're seeing where their gaps are and what we can do to kind of plug in, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Is that sort of similar for you as far as, what do you do the same thing as Penny often as far as your day-to-day at the company, or you're managing a quite large team around the world as well? So how does that work?
Yeah, there's an aspect that's about, building a team and but also having a vision for the spectrum of artists that we work with, in terms of how we want that to evolve, and in, new business initiatives, technological developments. So it's really a broad range across publishing. But yeah, with, I suppose, in terms of the composer side, it's very much identifying those artists that we work with and where they're at in their career and what's going to really make a difference, help them, progress to the next stage.
Yeah.
I just realised I had a question for these two. So on a project, often we'll be asked to, with the composer deal, to have it be a work for hire, so the production will own the master recording and the publishing. And
say that one more time. What is a work for hire?
Okay, so a work for hire is a buyout. So the fee that they're getting paid is to own the composition and the recording, and so that will be the production company will have some lawyer say, okay, we need to own the composition and the recording, and they're not actually set up to be a publishing company or admin or collect those royalties, but they just go, we have to own it. And so as the as the person in between the production and the music, which I consider myself part of that community, I then have to go to publishers and say, it's my job to say this is the offer and it's a work for hire, so the publishing and and the master have to be owned. And I often wonder, like from the publishing side, that means they no longer can collect money on that. So, how do you feel? Yeah, I often think like, okay, so it not 8 out of 10 times it might be 50-50 on the publishing, but the writer will still get to collect on the writer's share. But as a publisher, do you then go, okay, this is a bad, how do you respond to 100% of the publishing being asked to be owned by the production company?
Yeah, we're open to it. I mean, that's partly why I set up this division called Warp Composers, which was supposed to highlight that we are fulfilling the role of a composer agent alongside being the publisher. I think it depends what the fee is, whether we are, whether we're talking someone who doesn't have any credits, someone who has some credits, or someone who's in demand. So that's going to affect, but I guess it's just one of the aspects that we assess, and that becomes part of it when you assess, okay, what does this mean for the composer's career? What does it mean financially, creatively, career progression-wise? But we have done it, so we're open to it. It just, how does it, if someone does a short film and there's no money and they want to earn the publishing,
I wouldn't be asking. Yeah, exactly. We should know better too.
But yeah, so it's really I'd say you have to remain open to it, because this is what getting jobs can require.
Yeah, we're the same. We don't say no to anything. It's always a negotiation and just making sure the composer knows what rights they're still retaining, or Yeah.
And you'll make a commission on the initial fee, but it's just you don't have the back end income. I guess since this is going global, how does a publisher signing a publishing deal here in New Zealand, how's that helping them globally, I suppose?
Okay, so Native Tongue, up until recently, was an Australasian company, and so we had a network of sub-publishers around the world, and that means that they represent our interests in those territories on the same level. But we were recently acquired by a global company that's independent called Concord Music Publishing, which we're really excited about, because it means that we've got a bigger team working on our behalf in those territories. And so it's really exciting to have, offices all around the world that A, we can visit, but B, they're representing our writers' rights directly. They're on the ground. If our writers go there, they can go to their writing rooms and things like that. And while we were doing that before, I think if you're part of the same company, it kind of gives you a little bit more, push, I guess. Yeah.
Right, before there was slightly less tight relationships with the global network. I guess the thing about having, APRA has reciprocal relationships with PROs, performing rights organisations, in every single country, basically. And if you don't have a publisher, technically that money is being collected in those territories and then fed back through a windy way to APRA in New Zealand, and then they'll pay you out. If you've got a publisher on the ground, say in Germany, they're collecting that money directly from the PRO in Germany and then paying it directly back to you. So there's a more straight line effect. And also, they're obviously invested in your interests because they've done a deal with you for a reason. And so they're going to try and make stuff happen faster and more aggressively on the ground in that territory if there's an issue. Warp's obviously got your network that you've set up over time in different countries. How important has that been for you, to have those direct people on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, that's been, I think one of the, big things that we did was establish a US office and have that properly, staffed, and, also try and basically use our presence to, have writing rooms. Let's say that you're on your tour and, an opportunity comes from M&A and you're like, I better put something together. You have a place that you can go to and just work on music a little bit, or you have submitted some music, but they want some changes. That's the sort of thing that having a publisher that you have a close relationship with can be really helpful. They can support you, find ways that you can, not miss out on opportunities.
Having the, on the ground, especially in America, Amine and I are doing a talk about sync tomorrow, specifically about the sync ecosystem, so we'll go way more into this, but did you find that getting people on the ground in LA really changed the sync opportunities that you were able to get?
Yeah, absolutely, that, and the composition side, but also the songwriting side, which we haven't talked about, but is obviously a huge part of what happens in LA and in the US. So, and that's a lot of that involves having people on the ground, and so yeah.
Yeah, writing sessions for composers. If you're a composer that doesn't do that, doesn't write with anyone else, maybe you're just in a band, and it's just all about you and your band, and that's the whole thing. Opening up to doing sessions with other people, how does that sort of work for your composer? Is that important for composers to do from your perspective?
Yeah, I guess if we're talking about composers for film, probably not. But general, we think it's. I always like to sign people that are collaborative, predominantly because, if you're honing your craft by learning off somebody else every time you get in a writing room, it's giving you more experience. So it's almost like a training day. Like even if that song doesn't get released or anything, you're also building relationships with your peers, which I think is really important in a creative industry, so that you've got support around you all the time, because it's mentally challenging. And if you become mates and you've got that support system, then that's great, And some of the most amazing songs have been, co-written by people who might have been country singers normally, but then now they're writing pop songs, but you don't see their name, until it's a Silver Scroll or something like that,
Taylor?
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I think it's really important to be able to write with other people, but it's not the be-all and end-all, Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a panel tomorrow about the UK, and so since it leads into that, I think one of the great things about the collaboration aspect is that you can start seeing tours as having an additional dimension in terms of actually maybe this tour isn't quite making a lot of money for me to go to these places, or why would I stay a week in London when I could and it's going to cost me, I could be back home. But actually seeing tours as an opportunity to just spend more time in certain places, see people more regularly, that can really, expand your opportunities through collaboration. So, and also if you collaborate with someone in another country, and you feature on their song, for instance, that will help, you going global, I suppose, in that sense. So, yeah.
And I don't know how much time we've got left. Is there a timekeeper in this house? No? We'll just keep going. 12:30. Amine, the range of a just sort of skill-wise and sound-wise, how important is it for people to be really good at everything or kind of good at everything? Or is it better for people to stay in their lane and really hone and become like a specialist at a sound or a genre or a vibe?
I would say mostly stay in your lane. Go a little bit outside your lane, push your boundaries. But if you're trying to be good at everything, you'll be, in my opinion, average at everything. Like, so if you've got a certain sound or type of way of making music that is what you gravitate towards and you're an expert at, like, definitely push your boundaries, but not, I don't think the goal is to be good at everything, because, you know, if we're going to warp or where it's like, oh, that's the artist's sound who's doing composing, we would expect it to say be unique and original in that way. So if they're trying to do everything, then that could be anyone. So I think, you know, follow your artistic drive, but, you know, being collaborative, you might get asked to, you know, go outside your lane. But I don't think you're going to get hired on a job if you're, you know...
Just average.
Yeah.
I think there's an interesting, you know, I guess one of the projects I was involved with, you know, because I was talking about the stages of the composer's career, and, you know, some composers take many projects to get more established to the point where they get approached. But, for instance, with Anna Meredith, the first score that she did was this film called 8th Grade, and the whole score was done on a Casio keyboard, pretty much. And, you know, it was just perfect for the film, and that was, you know, that score was noticed, and that's how she became in demand. And so, you know, it was also like she had a unique approach, and that's, you know, if you dilute, you know, if you dilute your sound too much, there's a bit less of a chance that it will, you know, that your score will be unique in that sense. So you've just got to bear that in mind.
And you could be asked to do something typical and decidedly average by the production you're on. That's happened, you know. So I think in those cases, when it is perfunctory, you know, where they're like, no, we want it to be just like this, and they're giving you that roadmap, at some point after you've said, you know, or presented, oh, this is, you know, what you think works, and they come back and say, no, tone it down, we're just looking for, you know, some background drone noises, then, you know, in some cases you will have to do that, but then that's not the body of work that you send to your publisher to go out with to get additional work. You're like, as I call it, that's, you know, it's either for the meals or the reels. Like, so that's just a paying job, take that money, and then you might do another one for the reels to send out as your calling card.
Have you ever had anything that's just been so way out there? Like the composer's just gone, yeah, I'm off.
Yes.
I'm doing spaghetti western for some kind of dramedy.
Not that bad, but I did have an artist who shall remain nameless, but amazing virtuoso, and it was his first composing gig, part of... it's like this, is this being recorded? This is
closed circuit.
Yeah, part of there's a lot of people in the band. Part of Kamasi Washington's wider band. Amazing artist, but what he was doing, he wanted to record live, and it was like, you can't do that. We need sketches to give notes on. And he was like, well, no, I mean, I feel it and then I do it, and you're just like, wow. And so he actually did that for a little bit, and you're like, this is brilliant art. It does not work to picture.
Yeah.
And so, you know, eventually we got there in the end, but it was very difficult.
So when you see those music videos where people are playing in front of the film,
yeah,
that's not reality.
No, it's like, yeah, I mean, it can be done, but those people are so seasoned and practiced, and
they're playing something that was written.
Yeah.
in time. Yeah. I mean, that's how orchestras.
Yeah, it's maybe after doing it for like 20, 30 years they can do that, but yeah.
Are there any questions from the audience about this? Hello.
What would your definition between like a songwriter and a composer be? Or do you use them quite interchangeably?
I would say from my perspective, it's lyrics versus an instrumental. Like when I'm thinking of like the composer, I'm thinking of the underscore, and the songwriter, I'm thinking of like basically a top liner who's coming up with how the lyrics fit in to that. So as far as like on a cue sheet and everything, it's the same. Like that could be a 50-50 split, or it could be the same person. But that's how I would define it for me when I'm communicating to directors and producers. If they're like, "Oh, I know a great songwriter," I'm like, "But are they a great composer?" Like I do see that there is a difference.
There are some, I guess, projects that lend themselves to songs, being used across the project with the score taking a bit of a backseat almost, and so there are opportunities for songwriters to provide original music for film, for all kinds of projects. It is a slightly different, approach and skill set.
What about you? What do you think they're two different things?
Oh, me?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Well, I would consider myself a songwriter, but also I write music for myself.
I compose
so
music.
I guess in that sense, I am a composer and a songwriter. But yeah, publishing is obviously you're dealing with both. So I'm just trying to understand the context in which you're pitching different types of music to different directors or film producers, and how those kind of like intertwine and work together.
Right. It's probably just about getting down what you do have and can do, into a reel of some sort. We're going to wrap up very shortly. When you receive reels, what's the good length? If someone wants to prepare themselves a little bit to send music out and try and pitch themselves as a composer, what should it look like?
I mean, ideally, I would say between 2.5 to 5 minutes, just to show the range. And sometimes we'll get, it's not a reel, it'll just be an example of different types of music or score that they've written, that you can still hear if they, what their range is, what the style is. But I would say we'd mostly listen for about 2.5 minutes, and at 5 minutes we either have the idea or we don't. So
that's a very good point. I think on that note, we'll just go to lunch. Come tomorrow afternoon if you want to learn much more in depth about the sync process, and we'll see you there. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to everybody here.
Thank you.